Okay, maybe I can go ahead. Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Hi folks, I'm Fagan and my pronouns are she, her. I'm from India and I'm the volunteer coordinator with AUREA and I identify as Arrow. I am relatively new to the community, but I'm really excited and looking forward to the discussion that we're planning to have here. Yes.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Tejas. I'm a journalist and researcher, and I'm also an editor at Gazy Family, which is a media platform run and owned by queer people focused on queer narratives from the Indian subcontinent. I identify as aerospace, and yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really excited to hear what everybody has to say about their experiences.
Can I go next? Hi, I'm Riz, and I would prefer it if you use my first name only instead of pronouns, but you can use she and they pronouns for me. I am a student right now and also interested in mental health. I volunteer with several organizations and identify as Eros, and almost started my journey of finding out that I was Eros quite a while back. So I'm just excited to be here and talk about it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm here as an AUREA representative, and I identify as an race. Also, really excited to be here and be interesting to chat with everyone.
Anya, we have 2 more participants, but they'll be joining us shortly. We can continue the discussion. When they come in, we will admit them.
All right, sounds good. Then we can get started. So there's a lot of interesting topics that we can discuss during our time, but we'll see where we get. So we can start off with discussing our personal journeys with aromanticism. What aerospec labels do you use? When did you start using them? How did you find out about aromanticism? And what was it like, or has it been like, accepting and owning your aromantic identities and labels? So whoever would like to start first.
I'll go first. I am autistic, and that's a diagnosis that I got quite late. I'm 29, and I got it just a couple of years ago. But given that I'm autistic, for the longest time, I did not quite realize the hierarchy in relationships, where romantic relationships came at the top, inadvertently, and somehow friendships and platonic relationships or other forms of queer platonic relationships fell by. That was something that was really confusing to me. I never really understood what it meant to be in a romantic relationship, what it meant to feel romantic feelings for someone. It was quite confusing. And from what people said, it seemed like you put people on pedestals. You kind of form an opinion about them that you like based on very little knowledge about them. That was what romantic feelings seemed to be like based on what people have told me about. So it was quite hard for me to relate to it. And that's how I realized I'm quite aero. I'm very aero, more aero than he is. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I feel that feeling very arrow. Yeah, so I came across aromanticism the first time about 10 years ago. But I was like 19 or so, and there was not very much information though about it. So I kind of just saw something. I was like, oh, why can't I get a crush? Or I don't want a romantic relationship. What's wrong with me? But there was very little. I think I found something on a forum, and there was not very much. So I kind of just parked it. And then later on in college, I came across asexuality, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is it. And then I was like, okay, I'll just wait a little bit longer. And then aromanticism started to become more more recognized. And I was like, oh, here it is again. And I really started feeling like, oh, it's, the things that I thought were because of asexuality, it's actually aromanticism. And just especially over the years, I've been like, okay, yeah, my aromanticism is really my primary identity. Like, this is really what I feel. And so I identify as aroqueer, which is not a label that I think is used very much, but it basically puts aromanticism as like your primary identity, and then the rest you don't really want to define. And it's just in the realm of queerness, and that's how it is for me. I'm like, yes, aromanticism. I'm very aro. I really relate to that and identify with that, and the rest is kind of like what matters as less.
I mean, I quite relate to what you said. To me, I discovered asexuality first when I was like going through a few posts during Pride Month. And then I started seeing some aromantic memes, and I was like, oh, wait, this happens. I mean, many other people face it. Or it's not because I just want to concentrate on my studies that I'm constantly ignoring what people call romantic relationships outside. But then it started, like the journey started, and it was recently, or I guess in the start of 2020, I finally figured out that I'm aromantic and I definitely prefer platonic relationships more than any kind of relationships. So it's been like a journey, but I met a few other Aero folks online, and then we connected on that. I mean, how the world is so there's so much allonormativity in the world, and from me, from India, it's just like the pressure on romantic relationships is so much more that I'm like, no, I am not interested in it. Why are you talking about it? So that is pretty much how I figured it out, and I'm accepting it. It's still, but some days I feel like, okay, the world is just favoring romantic relationships a lot more than I would like it. It's a journey, and honestly, I'm very happy being Aero and Ace. I think that's it.
Thank you. Fagun?
Yeah, I think I do resonate with a lot of things the three of you said. For me specifically, I think a really long time was spent thinking that because of my personal experiences, like my past experiences, that is why I'm not inclined towards getting involved in any relationship, irrespective whether it's romantic or platonic or sexual, because of that. But I think after a lot of introspection, after talking to a lot of people, I realized that that is definitely a part of me, but my romantic orientation or lack thereof, but like is something that is not based on my experiences, is something completely different. There are times where I do question that, okay, are they the same? Is it because of this or is it completely different? Um, I think major reason would be because there are a lot of myths as well that are constantly put in our heads, and it's very difficult to just differentiate ourselves from that and separate us from those things. But then yeah, I think I've not been able to get into, like, right now I'm just there, arrow, that's it. I do not, there are so many different types of things, and I do not know whether I identify something specific or where do I stand. I know I'm there, and that in itself is just, I think it's just making me feel more comfortable, and that is why taking it slow, sort of just trying to understand one thing at a time. But yeah, that's that for me.
Thanks, Fagun. Julia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, a little. I'm kind of lucky because in my childhood, no one really hinted or insisted on the necessity of romantic relationship. So later, when I was asked something like, "So, who do you like?" I was calmly answering, "Oh, like no one. Thank you." And if there was no possibility to avoid this, I would estimate who's the funniest, who's the smartest, and just choose someone based on their strength, and which is, as I later found out, it's not exactly how falling in love works. And yeah, but as I said, I'm lucky because I never really felt I was wrong or broken or anything. But then media started to affect me, and in every story, in every book or film or something, there was a romance. And I started to question, maybe I'm a little different from everyone. How does it work? And I just recently discovered the Aromanticism, and well, yeah, actually, I found out about sexuality earlier, but I didn't fully relate to asexuality, probably because the Aromanticism was more important in some way for me. So when I discovered Aromanticism, I was like, so I'm both. That's nice. And it was it wasn't a big discovery. I just found the right words, and it is actually really good to have the words.
Thank you, Julia. And we have a new person coming in. And if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello everyone. I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm Ellie. I go by she, they, and I am a non-binary, aromantic, asexual. That's all for now.
Thanks. So right now we're just discussing our journeys with aromanticism, what labels you use when you started using them, and what it's been like for you in accepting your aromanticism. So if you would like to, tell us a bit about that, Ali.
Sure. Well, as far as labels go, I don't really. It's just the pronoun thing, really. I don't use a lot of labels because where I live, where I come from, people are not even aware of all the different LGBTQIA plus identities yet. They just stick with gay and lesbian so far, and asexuality, aromanticism does not even appear, does not even like come up. Anyway, they just think of me as someone. Oh, they're just not interested in men. That's the idea they have. But if I find a crowd, or if I find a bunch of people who are a little more open to, like talking about it or discussing it, then I just, bring it up, or I just try to insert the identity labels in a least intrusive way in conversations and in social media and other stuff like that. And as for discovering, it wasn't really that big of a like huzzah moment for me. It was more like I found out about asexuality before, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to like finally there's a label for it that people are actually using. I don't have to keep giving them long what explanation every single time. And then I came across aromanticism, and it was more eye-opening than discovering that, like I'm asexual and all that, because I think I relate harder as an to being an aromantic person than the asexual thing, because um it's the asexual thing is sort of a secondary thing for me, I think, because like back then I still thought sex and romance and sexual and romantic attraction are the same thing. It took me a while to discover that they're not. And that's when, the paradigm really shifted for me, because it was like, okay, Thanks a lot, Bollywood, for putting me in such a confused box all this time, and for and thanks a lot, Hollywood, for ending every good story with the true love's kiss, with which I hardly ever relate. So yes, discovering that I was aromantic, it just made so much sense. It was like my entire existence did an entire 360 roundabout conversion thing, and I was like, okay, and I have never stopped being comfortable with myself ever since finding out that yeah, it's a thing, and I don't have to keep saying to people, why are you not married? When are you going to get a husband? Why don't you have a boyfriend? And so I just go with no, I'm aromantic, and I don't have like any interest in those kind of things. For genuinely curious people, they ask like, what is that? And then I'm like, I give like a few minutes to explain it to them, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then another there's another facet of people who pretend that they know what aromantic is. I'm like, I can just tell it from the look on their faces that no, you have never heard that word, so stop pretending to know what I'm talking about. But then I'll be like, no, I'm not really interested, and like, I'm aromantic and all that. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, aromantic. I'll be like, mm-hmm. And then as long as they leave me alone, that's what I care about, really. Because I mean, uh, the ball has already started rolling. It doesn't always roll down with the same velocity or speed, but at least it started rolling. So I mean, I think first we have to get through to people who are genuinely interested. It's no use saying the same thing to people who are just going to like just nod their heads and not really pay attention. I mean, like, I have come across a lot of people, and sadly I came across a third type of people who learned the word for me, like learned the word aromantic from me and started using it in a very wrong way. Um, I was I was staying in a hostel, and there were this couple of girls, and they were talking about relationships and this and that, and I was like, okay. Then obviously the question came to me, and I was like, no, I'm aromantic and all that. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, we are also aromantic. I was like, okay, I mean, nice. And then a couple of days later, they come to just hang out in my room, and then they were like, they started the topic again. So I was like, okay, I found out aromantic allies sooner than I thought, because honestly, I was not expecting to come across other aromantic people so soon. People are still learning about it, and even people who are aromantic don't really realize it at first, because there's so much hype about finding your one true love. And if you happen to be on the um, polysexual or polyromantic or polyplatonic, it's even more confusing. So they come to my room, and then they say, like, like, yeah, Ellie, like, it's really nice to know, to hear these things from you. We also can't find, we are also aromantic. And I was like, yeah, you mentioned the other day, when did you find out? And they were like, oh, we are aromantic because we can't find boyfriends yet. And I was so offended, like blood boiling offended. And I was like, that's not what aromantic is. And they were like, like, vegetarian, vegan, what difference does it make? And I was like, no, it makes a big difference. And yeah, so being slightly different from what is considered normal in the society will definitely make you meet a lot of interesting people, and you really have to have the patience to filter through all of them, because there are genuine people out of them. We just have to have the patience and not punch majority of the people in face. So basically, that's it. I hope I covered everything that I wanted to cover.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's maybe Ellie is having some technical issues, but yeah, I think very relatable. It's always the question of when do you tell someone, when do you come out, and how do you want to go through the lecture of it? Are they going to understand? It's always having to judge, and I think it can be quite difficult. And sometimes it's just, all right, is it worth it? Especially when so many people don't know. And yeah, I think it's very interesting how even in places that are, considered more like queer friendly, they still don't know about aromanticism. And it can be pretty frustrating. They just misunderstand. But yeah, thank you everyone for sharing your personal journeys. Of course, our aromanticism doesn't exist in a vacuum. So I think it's interesting to talk about how our aromanticism can intersect with other identities and socio-cultural context. So how do your aromantic identities related and intersect with other identities like race, ethnicity, culture, language, religion? If anybody would like to start.
I think I have mostly experiences with respect to my assigned sex. I was assigned female at birth, and I feel like a lot of people romanticize the idea of my gender. Um, they so I see that happening a lot to me, where um I come across looking a certain way. Maybe I come across looking younger than I am, or my voice is more high pitched than what they expect it to be, or something like that. And that's all it takes for them to romanticize me and expect romantic kind of reciprocation from me. And that puts me in an uncomfortable spot, in the sense I usually enjoy that banter. I mean, I guess they call it flirting, for me, just witty repartee or like banter. But it's also like seen as romantic reciprocation, and then it's like an endless loop. And obviously then there is the context of consent and everything, but that's a lot more nuanced than we would like for it to be. Then we would kind of act on it in where, at least where I am at. So I do see that happen. And I am someone who doesn't mind being in romantic relationships if my partner can navigate those feelings. If somebody else has romantic feelings for me, I'm not going to question it or deny it, or be averse to it. I'm fine with them romanticizing me, but like at some point I feel like I'm very curious as to how in romantic relationships intimacy exists, or how intimacy destroys or replaces romance in long-term relationships. I'm of the opinion it does, but sometimes it doesn't. Like I still have crushes, I still have squishes. It doesn't mean I'm romantically into them. It's just that I am so curious about this person, and I'm so excited to spend time with them, or excited to share something with them. That's how I feel about my crushes. It's not a romantic feelings. I'm not thinking of them in certain romanticized ways. So I think it's quite complicated. I feel like these are all separate experiences, but they've all been clubbed into one thanks to mainstream rom-coms. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Fagun, would you like to go next?
I think I think getting back to what even you started off with, I think like one perspective to look at this is because being in the country that I am in, there's a lot of pressure in general to, I think getting in the relationship irrespective of how involved you are, and that sort of diminishes the whole purpose. But then there's so much pressure just for that it's very difficult for people to actually identify or accept that there are people out there who, because they do not want a romantic relationship, and that is why they do not want to get involved in, you know with the society terms as a marriage, right? And it's very difficult for them to understand that is a major factor. And I think that somewhat becomes like it makes it difficult for a lot of people to navigate through the whole thing. And there are luckily for me, so I grew up in a family with 3 female guardians who've been single or have been involved in one or less relationship for their whole life. They're like 45 right now. So I somewhere do feel that they would understand, but then outside this circle, just even coming out for people, it is going to be very difficult to actually understand and digest that this is such a thing that exists. For them, it's easy to, I think, define it as, it's a fear of commitment. And that is why you do not want to go ahead with that. And I think this is, till a certain extent, a lot of um, practices and everything would be very region specific or culture specific. But then I think there are certain things that just happen across the world, right? Irrespective of what culture you're from, what race you're from, it exists in the most, in different ways. It's there. It sort of suppresses what people on the A spec need, basically. Like, did that make sense? Is that something that yeah, the major challenges right now. But yeah, I'm thinking I do consider myself really lucky that I am coming from a family where, it's there, but then I think there are people who also understand. But then in the longer run, in the society, this is something where it might just get very difficult to actually find your place over here. And there would always be that societal pressure to, I think it's just not, it's very difficult for people to just understand that there is such a thing that exists, and it will always be very mushed up. I think no matter how hard you try, somewhere I just feel that. Yeah. Exactly what Sneha said. Yes. Thank you so much for that.
I also, sorry to butt in again, but I also feel like with romantic relationships more than any, and I'm autistic as well. So more than any relationship, there is a relationship escalator specifically for romantic relationships, which is bizarre in my opinion, because like we don't have relationship escalators that are preconceived in a friendship, right? It's usually like you discuss it with a friend, be like, hey, we've been best friends for so long. Let's get a tattoo together, or let's get like matching chains, or let's get matching bracelets, something like that. But in a romantic relationship, it's kind of preconceived, it's kind of assumed that there is a romantic relationship escalator that everybody is aware of. And somehow you just have to go as per that escalator that I definitely have missed out on the memo for. But yeah, the commitment phobia thing and the relationship escalator thing are so intricately woven into the romantic notion of relationships. It's a social rule that I've definitely come to learn through research as opposed to living, thanks to my autistic self. But yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it also takes away from, well, you can have commitment also in your friendships, in your platonic relationships. And it's just, why is it only for romantic relationships that you have this commitment? It doesn't really make sense. But yeah, it is interesting how I liked what Fagun said, that there can be differences in culture, but that it's still there across the world. And I think it's interesting to think about, because I'm Latin. I was born in Latin America, but I grew up in the US. So it's interesting how these two cultures touch on different parts of my aromanticism. So with like my family is pretty traditional, conservative, Latin culture. And it's very much this familism, this like expectation of like duty to the family, that you're supposed to get married and have children. And I find that if I were to say like, oh, I'm aromantic, I don't feel romantic attraction, especially talking to my parents, they would just be like, okay. There would still be the expectation that you get married. That's not to say that romance doesn't ever play a role. People do get married, based on romantic feelings and attraction. But it's still very much the expectation, like you get married anyway. It's just something everyone does. And I think especially someone who like, I'm socialized as, I'm the eldest daughter, I'm socialized as a woman, so there's very much that expectation, like, yeah, you have to get married. So yeah, when it comes to like talking to my parents, I never say, oh, I am aromantic. I always say like, I don't want to get married. And then, I mean, they disagree with it, but they get it more. It comes across more effectively. Whereas when I talk to like Americans, I'm very much like, no, I don't experience romantic attraction, because even you can say I don't want to get married, but they're like, well, you can still have a long-term romantic relationship that you plan your whole life around, so it's not as much of an impact. So I find it always interesting how to navigate these definitions, how you come out and explain this in different cultures. Ellie, would you like to go next?
I really relate to your point about marriage, because this is where the conversation with my mom always goes. Like, we went to our friend's house and she said like, wow, that's a nice place, it would be cool to have some marriage in here. Who are we going to marry? Who's going to marry? And I'm also like, I don't say I'm aromantic. I'm just like, I'm not planning to be married. Maybe not, please, no. And she's like, let's ask you like a few years later, maybe. And yeah, also about culture, not maybe about culture, but about my country. Generally in Russia, the situation with LGBTQA plus rights is not really good. Our president says offensive things in international conferences, and it is like, so Aromanticism is really is really invisible even in the LGBTQA plus. So it's kind of a choice whether I want to say that I belong to these letters or not really, or so it's really confusing what is the better way to explain something and how is it easier for people to understand and not discriminate me. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. Would Ellie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Again, because this is let's say I'm going to call this a safe closet right now, this thing which we're having right now, because every speaker who has, like who goes before me, I can't help it, but I find myself nodding my head. And I think the biggest challenge or the biggest elephant in the room every time is about relationships or about marriage, or like, why are you not with anyone yet? And I think that like I said, I was more relieved when I discovered the term aromantic than when I discovered the term asexual, because I think people talk more easily about romance and relationships first, which they somehow tie up with sex, but sex is not ever directly mentioned unless specifically, brought up. So everything is somehow tied up, like romance and sex is like tied up into one neat, very attractive package, which somehow has no appeal for me whatsoever. And I'm very fortunate that there are several of my female or female identifying cousins who have shown absolutely no interest in any gender or relationships and all. Like they are like 30 plus, 40 plus and all that. And like one of them literally asked me when I was around 23 and she was 33, and she just asked me, hey, do you have a boyfriend? I said no. And she was like, have you ever had one? And I said, no. And she was like, me too. And that's it. Like, case closed. We just went on to other stuff. And thankfully, because of that, I just, strangely, I never ever felt ostracized or judged for being aromantic. But then when the questions start pouring, it's so frustrating because people already think about sex and romance as an interchangeable term, sadly, just like how gender and sex is still used so interchangeably. And I'm so tired of explaining. So I just sometimes, if it's not a very strict place, and if they put gender on on any form that I have to fill up, I strike it out and I put sex. I write down sex purposely. I'm like a quietly, stubbornly rebellious in that sense. and I think my parents are also pretty open to the idea. They don't really force me, but what they're worried about is like who's going to take care of me when I'm older, or there will come a time when like no one can tell the future. I may get too sick to do things on my own. What will happen back then? What will happen then? And then I'm like, I'm still working on it and all. And then I tried to be at least in a platonic long-term relationship with at least two people so far. It did not work out for me. I think being mentally put into a box that yes, in a committed relationship like this, like they show in live updates on Facebook, it just scares the crap out of me completely, and I get cranky and I cannot be my normal self. I just feel so stifled, like the walls are closing in. And I was like, I'm definitely not a relationship person. But then, like Sneha mentioned earlier, the fear of being labeled as commitment phobic, it weighed very heavily on me. I was like, no, people are not going to look at the aromantic side of it. They're just going to circle that Ellie is a commitment phobic. And there's not much we can do about visibility except be our own true selves. So like working so hard in a small way daily, like even choosing the way you dress, or choosing what colors to put on you, cutting your hair. These are like the unspoken ways in which you show that you are slightly different, and you not necessarily conforming to the cishet society. So I was like, oh God, now they're going to think I'm commitment phobic, and I did not dare to come out and say it. Fortunately, both of my like partner thinks one is bi and monogamous. She didn't really care. She was like, okay, relationships are not my kind of thing either. And I was like, okay, I was really relieved. And the other one, she was like, I don't know what you were thinking. I know you are not a relationship kind of person. And I was like, okay, so I'm the last one to know. Good to know. And then, so it's been going on. We're like really, really close, slightly more than platonic friends, and that's it. I think that's the best I can do. And regarding the question about what will happen when I'm older and all, I think I may find out someone by that time, or I'll just see as it goes, because I can't really predict how things are going to be. And just for the fear of like what will happen, just what if, just deciding something serious and long term and concrete on the idea of what if, I think it will be very unfair on any person I am involved with, just based on the what if part of it. And it may just lead to friendships and other good platonic relationships being ruined, and I don't want to have that. And I'm sure there is something I can do. So whenever my mom brings it up, I just tell her that I'm open to being married at 50 rather than getting involved with someone just like a future investment. Hey, let's get together so that when I'm old you can take care of me. That does not sit well with me. I don't know, I wouldn't want that. so why should I put that on anyone else? And basically that. And one more thing that I could add, I suppose, is like the society I live in is very Christian, very monogamous, very heterosexual, and there are only two responses that you can get if you are not cishet. One is being ridiculed and laughed at, and the second is being completely ignored. Like, it's so obvious you are not straight, but they will be like, la la la, I didn't notice, so I'm not going to talk about it. And so I'm trying to, like, whenever I see someone who seems a little different, I just go and I talk to them and I try to subtly put it into the conversation that, I am not exactly straight. So if you are interested to have non-straight people to talk to just to get relief, I am open. And I actually gave my number to a gay fellow the other day. That's the first time I have done this whole phone number sharing thing. And he was like, sure, we'll talk. And I just walked out of there and I thought, I just gave out my number to a guy who's not even interested in women. And I think it's going great. So yeah, I have those tiny small incidents which really bloom in my heart, and it makes me happy. And then come across people who just make me wonder how they made it past 5 years old into adulthood. And then again, the question always goes back to, but like, what will happen when you are old? And I just want to tell them, like, yeah, Fred, that's why you're very cranky with your wife these days, because that's the reason you got married. But then, for the sake of peace, I have to hold back my thoughts because I just can't keep lighting people's backsides on fire just because they annoy me. So the best thing I do is just passive aggressively agree without agreeing, or just start a whole sermon on why they are wrong. There is no in between. And if that helps to bring a little light, a little bit of representation, I'll take it, even if it's annoying. Because sometimes when you are different, not sometimes, lot of the times when you are different, you have to put up with people who will try to put you into a box, who which they think should be your box, just because they are too lazy to understand or do a simple Google search about the kind of box you are in. And people who are like, honest enough to admit that they know my labels, but they are refusing to actually study or find out. They're just, like, cut, copy, paste, fold it, refold it, double fold it, make it into an ugly little ball and present it back to me, saying that no, this is you. Even though this is what you are, I'm going to fit it into something I'm comfortable with because I'm too lazy to do my homework. I refuse to be the nice little lady giving them cookies and welcoming, like, hi, welcome, I'm here to dispel your thoughts. I refuse to be that person anymore. I just tell them Google is available in several languages, many of them which are Indian, and I'm not going to do your homework for you anymore. And if you hate me for it, you're most welcome. I think it comes with age. It's after a certain age, you just stop giving so much into what people think, because mental peace is so much more important. I mean, like, literally the person we talk to the most is ourselves. Someone said that to me and I couldn't answer back, and I am like, that thing is seething inside of me for 3 4 days. No, thank you, I may just drop that tomorrow. I prize my mental peace much more than that. So yes, if it involves pissing off people, um I'm all for it. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, just live your life. That's what you gotta do.
I really
Uh,
like what Elizabeth said about, someone gets married for the sake, like, you're supposed to be in a romantic relationship so that you can get married and then they can take care of you later. And that sounds so unromantic, to be honest, if I have understood romance correctly. That's that's such a bizarre approach. That's number one. And the second thing is, I feel like there is a lot of romance in my friendships. There is a lot of romance in my other relationships. In my with my cousins, there is a lot of romance. If romance is holding hands, then I hold hands with a lot of people that I'm comfortable with. If romance is writing each other letters, handwritten notes when you're away, or drawing them something, then there is a lot of romance in my friendships and with my cousins and other family members. We do that for each other. And this whole idea that, oh, don't you need someone? I think somebody had written about this in the chat. And don't you need someone who makes you feel special? Why is nobody else making you feel special and valued and cherished? I think we should question that. Why do I need to seek out one particular person to me? There's a lot of onus on that relationship and that person as well. But if that person wants to do it, then that's no problem. But why am I only getting a source of validation from that one person? What happens tomorrow if that turns out to be an abusive relationship, right? Then you cannot rely on it. That's what happens in a lot of these monogamous situations. It's abusive, and then you're not able to really talk about that abuse because you've romanticized this so much. You put so much is riding on this one relationship to work out. So yeah, I really think that's something that I feel strongly.
I kind of relate to it, and talking about romance and friendships, I would say mostly my close friends, they are all queer. So it's just there's this understanding of what it is and what it's going to be. So we just write them random emails, give handwritten notes, we just be affectionate, and that's all. And we all have a common understanding of what my identity is and what kind of relations I have with them. So, and when people say that they value romantic relationships more than friendships, I really don't get that concept. Why do you need to separate them and maybe put one at a higher pedestal for all my and when you have more friends, close friends, I have seen this, that there is this the affection I feel for them and the concept of romance that we both have. It's pretty similar. So when we could talk about, and when we see someone else putting romance, it's like what the film show or what the media portrays usually, we could rant about it and take out all the frustration is there. So I guess that is pretty important. I remember this thing. I had an English teacher, and as in India, you have to get married, otherwise there are so many things that goes wrong. The society questions everything and anything. So there was just my English teacher, she was in her 50s and she did not get married. She was like, I will not get married, I am independent, I can live my life. And when my mom would ask me, like, do you want to get married, I'm like, no, I don't want. Then she would say, oh, it's that English teacher's influence on them. I'm like, no, it's not. She's the one who taught me that. She was the first one, I would say, who introduced me to this concept that it's okay if you don't want to get married, it's okay if you don't want to believe in romantic relationships. And for me, I guess that's where my journey started to this whole self-discovery. So that, and I'll talk about it openly here, but if my family members hear it, I'll get into trouble. So that is also another thing that's related to my culture, I would say. And that is something, I would like to have more open conversations about it with them, but we cannot really change what they are being conditioned to. It's been so long. And that is pretty much it.
Yeah, thank you. It is indeed very difficult to change people's concepts of what relationships are, and that's why I like relationship anarchy so much, because you kind of remove these labels of like, what is romantic relationship, what is a friendship, and you kind of just zoom in on the specific parts that you like. And when you start any kind of relationship with someone, you can be like, well, I would like to do this or that in it, and you don't have to let the label dictate what you do. And so I think it would be nice if more people could go into relationships that way. And because indeed, like so many of these romantically coded behaviors, like holding hands, like, yeah, you can do that with friends. Why only in a romantic relationship? And why are they romantically coded in the first place? Yeah, they just
to add to that, I would say, I always joke around with my friends that okay, we should all just move out of their houses, get a pretty good house, adopt a lot of dogs, and just cook food for each other. And that's the best way we could live happily ever after.
the dream, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, being Aro can be hard in society that doesn't really understand us. And there are lots of myths and misconceptions about aromanticism. So we already talked a little bit about how, people might view us as being commitment phobic or having like issues with intimacy, which, yeah, I always find also a bit funny is like, that's not it at all. I like to be very intimate with my friends. You just like to put things in boxes. But yeah, what other sorts of myths or misconceptions have you all encountered?
I think another thing that really adds to the annoyance is that Google Text still does not recognize aromantic, so they turn us into nice smelling plants, aromatic, and the number of times I have had to fix that. So yes, and I'm like, okay, Google, by the time you put this in your water, by the time it is saved in my personal keypad, maybe people will finally start to believe. People are always like, but why? How can that be? And I'm like, it's simple as breathing.
Yes, I go ahead. I think somewhere I've realized, let alone cis-het alloromantic people, I think within the queer community as well, aspect communities are sort of downplayed, and there's a whole notion that we're not oppressed. And I think somewhere I feel that the reason we're not oppressed is because our orientations are not really considered valid. They're like, okay, you've not met the right person, and that is why you've not. And I think that is after a point it gets really frustrating, because when you say you're not oppressed, we're not oppressed because we're not taken seriously. We are oppressed in that context. Like, oppression would not just mean being verbally abused or being I think ridiculed about. Over here, the main challenge over here is that we're not taken seriously. Our orientations are not taken seriously. It's just like, and then explaining that to the other person just gets so difficult after a point. So I think within the queer community also I've seen that happening a lot when I think like expecting people outside the queer community to actually understand that there's something is, for me, I think it's a very far-fetched thought when someone within the queer community is not able to understand that, because there is a lot of diversity, and that is one place where you think that okay, anything and everything would be accepted. And thankfully, I think even when Reese was talking, I realized that your experiences have been very different, which is like a really great thing. But then there are still a lot of, I don't know, I think a lot of people within the community which still need to understand the whole idea.
Yeah, really good point. I think the whole idea that arrows are not oppressed is because people also don't recognize that amatonormativity exists. And I find it very important to put aromanticism, to situate aromanticism in the social context for that reason, because people don't realize that there are so many social systems that can oppress us, and not only amatonormativity is not only bad for aromantics, but for everyone. It puts pressure on everyone. So yeah, this idea that arrows are oppressed just because or not being harassed on the streets, yeah, really diminishes the experience, our experiences. I think someone's asked
Yeah,
about
yes.
asking a question.
I was asking if I can unmute. I was asking the question within the question. It's very meta. Um, okay. I hope you can hear me. There's
Yeah.
no trouble, right? Okay. So my question, the question is, so there is this very, I'm going to call it unfortunate. No, for me it is unfortunate need for support and acceptance, and especially for those of us who, who did not get a lot of it from our core circles. Let's call it our core. The people in our lives who maybe were supposed to give it to us. So I think a lot of my life, I've just gone out looking for that support everywhere else. And I think I have misconstrued that as romance. So which is why it's so difficult for me to even understand this identity I mean, I definitely know I'm asexual, but I'm very confused about aromanticism, and hence this is why I'm here asking this question, because I think, and also that overlap has happened because as one of you, I think all of you in some ways have pointed out, the whole exposure to media and existing societal norms, etc. So I'm just trying to understand here that given our, and also because this, you know how you mentioned that, you should just move out and live with dogs and pets generally, which is so wonderful to me. But then I know that there will be times when I'll feel that need for that vacuous support which is missing in my life. So I wanted to ask if there is an experience around that which I can hear from many of you, which can sort of like help me figure this out, because I have honestly never been able to figure out the difference between. I googled a couple of days ago, how do you know if you're aromantic? And one of the questions that happened to pop up is, if you can't tell the difference between friends and romantic attractions, so to speak. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense to me because that happens. Because I think I'm innately looking for acceptance wherever I go. And that doesn't have to be in the form of that love, Valentinian love. I don't know. And I get that. Okay. So, yes, I'm figuring this out. But yeah, like, what do you do when that need kicks in so badly? And the reason I ask this is because from what I've heard so far, I feel like those of us who are aromantic, maybe we can have fleeting connections with people, but I tend to want this permanence, that somebody will accept me for who I am forever, which I'm starting to realize is obviously not entirely possible, but I want it. And now what do I do about that? And am I still aromantic if I want that? Sorry, long question.
Can I talk about it, because I relate to it a lot?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. So, when I started my journey of discovering, like, okay, am I aromantic? Am I actually on the spectrum? I had a lot of questions. And, firstly, it started, okay, what Divya just pointed out, as in the primary stages, I was like not given much affection, being the eldest sibling. So, it's always there that you are not getting enough attention and affection from your parents. I mean, they're first caregivers. So I was like, okay, maybe it's because of that I don't feel it. And then I guess it somewhat correlates with my ADHD too, that I always feel that, okay, I'm not giving enough affection and I maybe want that. So, at that time, I'm slowly trying to unlearn all this, that I have people around me who value me and they accept me as for who I am. And for days when I feel like, okay, I'm not feeling valued enough, I would definitely just go and call up a friend and maybe have a talk about it. So it helps me a lot to understand that, okay, yes, I'm feeling better. And for me, I discovered that I was aeroflux. So my identity, it fluctuates a lot, but it's within the spectrum. My experiences, they vary a lot. I mean, one day I could relate to one friend of mine who's aero, then other day the other friend who's like, they are on the spectrum, but they have different labels. So it's just very different, and your experience is your personal experience. I would say try out being understanding the label, what aero is, define what aromatic means to you, and then you can always look for more blog posts or memes, and see the comment section on the memes, because people usually talk about it a lot there, and reading about other people talk about it, tell their experience. I feel like, okay, yes, this is real, this is valid, I am valid, I'm accepted. And that is for me, I guess. I was hopeful in some, I mean, I was helpful in some way to you and answering your question, Vijay.
It does. And I mean, I think I'm also starting to come to terms with the fact that I can define it, which is new to me. I don't think I understood that before. But I think I always thought that because I want this sort of permanence, that I mean, of course, that comes from a baggage of sorts. It's always been very hard for me to understand that since everybody has their own story, how do you make a standard narrative of what a something is, right? But now that you say that, yeah, you can figure it out for yourself, then I think that's a comfortable acknowledgement for me. So thank you, Riz, that really helped. Also, Julia, thank you. I was just gonna send you that. And thank you everybody really for all the stuff that you've said today. I think it's really helped me also.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. It's there's also speaking of misconceptions. There's this idea that if you're aromantic, then you don't want close relationships of any kind, that you don't or experience or can't experience love. And of course, some aromantics, they don't relate to that. They consider themselves loveless, but you can be aromantic and want also a long-term partnership. It doesn't have to be romantic. Aromantics can still have romantic relationships. So I always like to think of it as attraction is removed from the behavior. You can still pursue a long-term relationship, have that permanence, even if you're not necessarily attracted to them in particular ways. So like Grace was saying, like, yeah, you create your own narrative. But thank you for that question. I think it's always an important one. Are there any other misconceptions or myths? I don't know, Julia, you would like to step in and say something?
Maybe I didn't really get a lot of myths because I'm not out to many people, so I received a little of comments, but maybe the part where people say, "Oh, so you don't need love, okay," and you're like, "Sorry, what? How about family? How about friends? This is also love." And you start explaining, and they're like, "Oh, wow." Yeah, and they're being sorry for you in some ways, which is like, maybe you think I'm missing something, but I don't really think so. I'm perfectly fine with what I have, and platonic relationships are doing everything I want. So thanks.
I would like to add a little bit there. It just resonated so hard with me. I have to take a few breaths first. One of the most infuriating comebacks I got from someone I considered a friend was like, he kept pestering me like, "Who is your secret boyfriend?" Obviously, people will assume I'm straight. "Who's your secret boyfriend? You can tell me your old friends stuff." Blah, blah, blah. And I was so annoyed. I just sent him a Google link on Aromanticism, and I told, "Read this." And he read it. And I was like, And he's like, "So you don't have a heart?" And I was like, "What? You love your mom with your intestines? You love your siblings with your liver? your heart is only for riding off into the sunset with someone. And people are so unbelievable sometimes. They're so desperate to not do the homework to understand something new. They would rather take whatever that you are and bash it up and push it into a box that they think it should be in, and that really annoys me. And then there's these part of my social circle who just jokingly insinuate that I will be the killer of men, apparently, because I don't accept proposals. It's how original. And it's like so annoying when that happens. And then the irony is, Ellie, you have an unbiased opinion and you have an unbiased point of view. And then all the romantic problems come to me. How does that work? Like, what makes you think that works? And sometimes I just tell them, look, it's enough that I find romantic representation everywhere. Spare me. And it's so annoying. And like, sometimes when we watch movies together and there are prolonged scenes of staring into each other's eyes, I just do blah, so that they hear. And I am a little I think if when words can't get through, you have to resort to such measures. And fortunately, my closest friend, two of my closest friends, they are as straight as they come, and they don't care at all that I'm not straight. They don't understand it fully, but they accept it. And we went to watch a movie once, and as it is the norm in Bollywood, there was a completely unrelated item song in the midst of the protagonist finding out his aim in life or whatever. And then this girl comes. She's dressed in something that can only be called a glorified bikini with a skirt that barely covers everything. And she's there. She's dancing her way through with lyrics and words that have absolutely no relation to the context of the plot. And then I see a flash of white like near me, and I thought like one of the lights in the movie hall had a short circuit. So I turned around in a panic thinking the fire alarm is going to go off. No, it's my friend. And the white flash was nothing but her teeth. She was like, you are trapped now, where will you go? And I was like, that is so mean. You are one of the few people who understands that I don't care for this. And she was like, yeah, it's because I feel like I feel so bad for you that you have to sit through these things. And that felt so good. And I just wish more people were just like, oh, you're different, okay, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't even affect your life personally. Why do you have to have so much opinion on how I am? And yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. I think, yeah, it would be nice if more people were accepting about that. But yeah, I think I've also done that sometimes when there's like a romantic scene or something. And I'm like, ugh. And then, people will be like, oh, stop being so immature and childish. And I think that's, something else that arrows can get quite a lot is like, oh, you only, you don't want romance because you're so immature. Stop being like, grow up, which can be very frustrating. And, it makes you question like, why is engaging in romance seen as like this adulthood milestone? Like, we can be adults without all this stuff. I'm like, I'm almost 30 and I'm like, well, I have a job, I pay my bills, I have my own place. Like, is that not adult enough? I still have to get married and have kids for you to finally consider me an adult. It can be pretty frustrating. And I'm always like, well, when will I be considered an adult? Do I have to wait until I'm 80? Then maybe people will take me seriously. Be an elder. Yeah, but I think it's difficult to deal with all these things sometimes. Let's see. Is there anything anyone else would like to add onto this? Well, we have about, I think, 15 minutes left. So if there's anything else that anybody would be interested in talking about, we can talk about like different kind of relationships that aromatics can have. What would you like to have in your ideal situation, and or what kind of relationships have you experienced?
Yeah, right. Okay. I'm so sorry. I wanted to say something before, but then I had my family around and I could not really talk. I think once for someone who is otherwise, who loves romance, okay? I love reading romantic books and movies and series. And I think for me, a major challenge to actually figure out where I am placed was because for someone who does not want to be involved in a romantic relationship, but otherwise in theory loving, the idea of even just seeing people in romance. Like in fact, in general, like even in my day-to-day life, if people ask, like, I like the idea of shipping people together, right? Which that is why for a lot of people around me who I came out, they were like, Fagan, we see you shipping people so much. We see you loving and obsessing over romance novels. And then how on earth do you think that? I think so that was a major, I think, challenge for me to actually feel that. Then a lot of times I'm like, okay, wait, do I really fall on this spectrum, or is it just something that I think because I relate to someone, that is why I think that, okay, I identify as arrow? And it's not that I do not. I think in theory, I love the idea of romance. For myself, I do not. But the challenge we here is, so I think like even something like Divya was talking about and something related to her question was that, how do I know the difference between romantic and romance, and, like having a romantic attraction and a platonic attraction? And I was just having this similar conversation to a friend of mine the other day. Like, so both of them are really close, and majority of our acquaintances and our friends thought that they were dating. But the thing is, it's such a sad thing that as a society, we've been conditioned in such a way that whenever someone cares about the other person, or, is actually looking out for the other person so intensely, that automatically there are some romantic feelings involved. And it's very difficult for them to actually understand that, despite, like, I would make sure for someone whose language of love is act of service, or, physical touch. For me, I can look after the other person throughout, like, I can give my whole life and put in all the effort to just make sure that the other person is actually happy. And for then a lot of people, they misinterpret it as something that is, if you like that person, that is why you're doing them. And that is not the case. And it is just such a sad thing that even seeing people, like, I've had so many relations. So I think a year back, I was ambushed into a relationship, a romantic relationship, because with my best friend, who I've been best friends with for the past 4 years, because the kind of person I am, I can come off as really, invested. And for the other person, it was very difficult to figure out that, okay, I was interested not because he was my friend, like just because he was my friend, and not because I was romantically interested or, wanted anything. And I think that is two of my relationships, both the relationships have been such where I have been sort of ambushed into it because of a lot of peer pressure, and then being constantly told that you were the one who led that person on, right? Your intentions you've not made very clear. And definitely, I think from my side, I did not tell that person that I was arrow, because I did not think that the person was in a space to actually understand what, like, where am I placed exactly. And that is why I was never able to explicitly actually, say it out loud that I'm arrow and I do not want one. But then it's just, I think that is a major challenge with even relationships. And I think, like, unfortunately, till date, I have not been able to come across anyone who would be, interested in a queer platonic relationship, or who even, I think, honestly, I feel out of there might be only 20% of the chunk who would actually be aware of what UVRs are, or even be able to digest that such a thing can exist without any romantic, or for the matter of fact, even a sexual, involvement, which is, I think, a huge challenge. And yeah, I definitely agree to what I think Divya and Lisa have been saying on the chat as well. It's a huge, huge, I think, pain after a point.
I'm sorry if I can just say this here, but I was watching a movie yesterday which was supposed to be about other things, and even there the repeated the let's, I'm going to say this in binary terms now, if just for the sake of this conversation, okay, I do not believe in the binary, but just the boy and the girl, because they are boy and girl, okay, let's say it that way, repeatedly spending excessive time together on a constant basis, no kissing, no nothing happening yet, but the vibe that of on-screen chemistry is giving off is that only. No, I am picking, that's what I'm picking up from it, that, oh, they're falling in love. So what am I learning? That if you spend enough time with someone, you'll fall in love with them. I mean, okay then. So but that's why I asked you that question that I did, that if I want this kind of sort of like somebody in my life of sorts, that doesn't necessarily mean I want it romantically, right? This is the problem. This is what I could not understand for the longest time, because every single movie I saw, in fact, for me, like, for the concept that, oh, be friends with your partner before you get into the partnership, makes perfect sense. But why is that coming under the romantic bracket then? Why is romance the end goal of everything? Sorry, got very emotional. I'm going to go back on mute.
I would say, I mean, what Fagun said, it's pretty, I mean, I sort of relate to it. So I'm someone who shows affection by physical touch, and I'm usually okay with it with the people I'm comfortable around. So people just assume that I'm probably in a relationship with my best friend. I'm like, no, we're not. And since my best friend is also on the Aero spectrum, so we have this running joke between us that, okay, now it's official. Okay, let's just tell people it's official now and let it be. We don't even bother correcting it right now because they won't understand what it is. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's really this idea that if you have a very close connection to someone, it must be romantic. There's no way that friends can be so intimate and want to, plan their lives around each other. Like, that can't happen. But yeah, I think that's the beauty of, some people mentioned the queer platonic relationships. But yeah, it can be hard to find those. And then what do you do if you want to have that kind of relationship? Where do you turn to? I think it can be a lot of work. And I personally have tried to do these things with friends, but it's always like, what does it mean? What does it look like? And especially if they already have like a romantic partner, then they're like, no, I have to always place them first. Sorry, can't include other important people in my life. So it can be pretty tough. But we have a couple of minutes left, and I think it could be a good time to open up the floor to whoever has any questions, and we can have a little Q&A session.
Is anyone else bothered that for people like us, especially for aromantics who are not in a relationship per se, is anyone bothered that people automatically come up with the opposite gender when they ask about why you're not in a relationship? Like the society I'm in is probably 70 to 80% homophobic, and I got so fed up, and the little the literal translation of saying, why are you not married yet, in my society is like, why don't you have a husband yet, or why don't you have a wife yet? That is the way we, like, we say the sentence. So I just say, whenever, like the other day, my one of my cousins was like, it's time for you to find a husband. And I was like so done, so tired. Like, I love her, she's so sweet and all that, but she's really uninformed and she's old. So I just, like, I just say, yeah, I just can't find a good wife yet. And the look of horror in her eyes, and I kid you not, she stopped talking for about a full minute. And then there was another guy, who I don't really know, like an acquaintance. He just saw me. How are you? And the next question is, get married, find a husband. And I was like, why don't you do it first? And then he got offended because it insinuated that he's gay. I was like, I can shoot back at you. And now everyone, someone like stresses, you need to find a husband. Your biological clock is ticking. And I'm just like, someone said like, don't you ever want to have kids? I was like, I may adopt. Then they were like, but don't you want to make one? And then I was like, there's a lot of ready-made options available. Why should I make more? And he was like, yeah, that's true. When you corner people who ask you such outdated and medieval questions, they really don't have an answer. That's the funny part. But that's always the first thing that they ask you. And I don't know why they don't look back at themselves. I'm like, dude, maybe you have to change something. Maybe you have to change in the way you talk to people. But no, it's just so uncool. I can't think of any other word.
Um, I think
All right. Well, we have only a couple of minutes left, so we can start to wrap up. I want to thank everyone who participated. It was really great conversation, and I hope that it's also made some things clearer for some of the folks who are listening in. And yeah, I think unless there are any other questions, then we can wrap up here. So thank you, everyone, and as well, thank you, Sneha and PanACEa for this opportunity. It's really great to have had this moment to talk about aromanticism. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed talking to all of you. You're so hilarious. I want to save the chat.
It's so good to see so many aromantic faces. I mean, the worst feeling in the world is thinking like that there is no one else like you, no one else going through the same thing as you, and just having, like one more face. Like, yeah. So it's okay. It's okay to be weird, and just the solidarity alone, it's very comforting. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you everybody for joining in today. This has been the most hilarious conversation discussion I have ever heard this entire, like, I can say entire life as well. So, and it was so relatable. Every thought that I had in my head whenever I see movies, it was just right there. We were saying it. So thank you for that. And a few announcements. So we are going to be starting at 2. The next session is at 2 o'clock. And we have the ace couple, Courtney and Royce, joining us in from the US. So please do come back at 2. And after that, after their after the chat with them, we'll have like an informal discussion on relationships from the asexual perspective, aromantic perspective. So it's going to be like aces and eros unite and talk about relationships and whatnot, romance, whatnot. Yeah. So please do join. I think it's going to be a wonderful discussion. So that's it for now. We'll